Barca have just done something almost impossible last season. They won everything. Perfect season, 4 trophies, and once again, they proved that they are the team everyone in Europe is trying to catch. So naturally, you would expect them to keep the same team together and go again next season. But instead, Barca decided to do something completely different. This summer, the club has gone through one of the biggest changes we have seen in years, with some of the players who defined this era moving on, and a new generation starting to take their place. And what's interesting is that Barca aren't trying to simply replace what they have lost. They are building something different, younger, fresher, and potentially even more exciting. So, after dominating women's football for years, what does the next version of Barça Femení actually look like? Because Barca's new era has already started. Before we talk about the changes Barca are making this summer, we have to understand just how good the team was last season. Because this isn't a story about a team trying to fix a broken team. It's almost the opposite. Barca had just completed one of the best seasons in the history of them, winning 4 trophies and completing the quadruple. They won the Liga F, Copa de la Reina, Supercopa de España, and most importantly, the Women's Champions League. And that Champions League win was especially important because it once again confirmed Barca's place at the top of European women's football. They weren't just winning domestic trophies anymore, they were consistently competing for the biggest prize in Europe, and season after season, they had become the team that everyone else wanted to be. The squad itself was also a perfect mix of experience and talent. You had players who had been through almost everything together, alongside younger players who were beginning to make their own mark in the first team. The football was still built around the same identity Barca had developed over the years. Possession, quick combination, player constantly moving into space, and that ability to make even the biggest game feel like Barca were playing them on their own terms. But what made the season even more impressive was the fact that they didn't just win trophies. They did it while continuing to produce some incredible individual performance. By the end of the season, there was really only one conclusion you could make. They have done it again. They had won everything that was available to them, and if you were looking at the squad from the outside, you might have thought the obvious next step was simple. Keep everyone together, add 1 or 2 players and trying to do it again. But football doesn't always work that way. Because while Barca celebrating their greatest moment of the season, the club was already entering a completely different state. Some of the players who had built this incredible era were getting older, and others were ready for a new challenge, and Barca had to make a decision. Do they keep holding on the team that had already given them everything, or do they start preparing for what comes next? And that's exactly where the story of this new Barca begins. And this is where things start getting really interesting. Because after winning everything last season, you would expect the Barca to simply keep the same core together and go again. But instead, this summer has turned into one of the biggest transitions we have seen from Barca in years. The first and most emotional departure was Alexia Putellas. For more than a decade, Alexia had been one of the faces of Barca's rise. From a team that was still trying to establish itself as a European giant to the dominant force we know today. She wasn't just a great midfielder, she was a captain, the leader, and for many people, the symbol of Barca Femení itself. So seeing her leave after all those years naturally felt like the end of something. And she wasn't the only legend to leave. Leon also moved on after becoming one of the most important defenders in the club's modern history. Since joining Barca in 2017, Mapi had been a huge part of the first team's success. Known for her aggressive defending, confidence on the ball, and willingness to play out from the back. Onabatia also left Barca and joined Arsenal, meaning Barca were losing another player who had become an important part of their defense. And there was still more. Salma Parayuelo, one of the most exciting forward of her generation, also left the club after several seasons in Barca. Suddenly, a team that had just completed a quadruple was looking very different. And that's what makes this transition so fascinating. Barca aren't losing players because the team failed. They are losing players after winning everything. The club is essentially choosing to move forward before the old core becomes too old to compete at the highest level. And that's a risk decision, because you can replace a position, but you can easily replace experience. You cannot immediately replace the mentality of players who have won multiple Champions Leagues. And you certainly cannot replace the identity that players like Alexia and Mapi helped create. But Barca seems to have accepted. Instead of trying to find another Alexia or another Mapi or Ona, they are trying to give themselves the chance to create something completely new. And that's why the next part of this summer is so important. Because while some of the biggest names from the old era were leaving, Barca were already preparing the players who could defend the next one. So if Barca are letting go of so much experience, who exactly are they building the future around? This is where the summer transfer window becomes really interesting, because Barca haven't simply gone out and replaced every departure with another established superstar. Instead, they are putting a lot more faith in young players. And one of the clearest examples is Rene van Asten. At just 19 years old, the Dutch defender arrived from Ajax as one of the most exciting young talents in Europe. After a breakthrough season in Netherlands, where she was named the Johan Cruyff Talent of the Year, Barca clearly sees something special in her. But what's important is that she's not arriving as a finished product. She's arriving with potential, and that tells us a lot about the direction Barca are taking. They are not necessarily looking for someone who can immediately become the next Leon, but they are looking for someone who could potentially become that player in the future. Then there is Martina Fernandez. Instead of searching for another expensive center back, Barca decided to bring Martina back by activating their buyback option. And this is a really interesting move because Martina already knows the club, the system, and the expectation that come with playing for Barca. She's also entering an important stage of her career. With Leon gone, there is no much more room for Martina to establish herself as a regular part of the first team defense. But the young players aren't limited to the new arrivals. Barca already have some of the biggest young talent in women's football within their squad. Take Vicky Lopez for example. She has already shown that she can handle first team football despite her age, and we have seen more and more signs of what she could become. With some of the experienced players leaving, Vicky now has an opportunity to take on a much bigger role. And then there is Sydney Shelton-Lake. The Swiss young star arrived at Barca with a lot of potential, and we have already seen glimpses of why the club were so interested in her. She's still developing, but that's exactly the point. Barca are giving these players time to grow inside of the best environment in women's football. And perhaps one of the most interesting players to watch next season will be Esme Bruch. Unlike Rene or Martina, Bruch isn't new to Barca anymore. She's already had time to adapt to the club and understand the way Barca want to play. She's no longer just the young player with potential. The expectation will be for her to become a much more important player. And that's the bigger picture here. Barca aren't suddenly becoming a team full of teenagers. They still have world-class players like Aitana Bonmati, Patrick Guijarro, and Graham Hansen. But the balance is changing. The older generation is slowly moving out, while the young star is moving forward. And that could completely change the way Barça Femení looks over the next few years. Because now, the question isn't who will replace the old Barça. It is, what can this new Barça become? And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from everything that's happened this summer. Barca aren't trying to recreate the team that just won the quadruple. They are trying to create the team that will win the next one. The departures of Alexia, Mapi, and Ona might feel like the end of an era, but at the same time, they are creating an opportunity for players like Vicky, Sydney, Esme, and new players to step forward. And that's what makes this Barca so interesting. They still have the experience of players like Aitana, Patri, and Graham Hansen. But now, they are surrounded by a young generation that has something to prove. Maybe this team won't look exactly like Barca we have watched dominate Europe for the last few years. And honestly, that's probably the point. Every great team eventually has to change. Players leave, new players arrive, and eventually a new generation takes over. Barca have simply decided to start that process now. After winning everything, they are choosing to look forward. And if this young player can reach the level Barca believe they can, then what we are saying right now might not be the end of Barca's dominance. The old era is over, and now it's time to see what the new Barca can become.